Okay, so in problem number 1, we are asked to find the distance and midpoint of two given points. So for distance formula, it does not matter which one you label as your first point and your second point, as long as you keep x1, y1 together and x2, y2 together. So we're going to call the first one x1 and y1, and the second point x2 and y2. So you're going to go ahead and you plug that into your formula. So the distance equals the square root of of 8 minus negative 4 squared plus 4 minus 3 squared. Remember, when you subtract a negative, you're adding a positive, so that becomes the square root of 12 squared plus 1 squared. Remember, we're just simplifying what's underneath the square root first. That is 144 plus 1, so the square root of 145. Now, you need to break down 145 to determine what the simplified radical is, because your answer needs to be in a simplified radical. So, think what numbers will go into 145. Well, we know 5 will, so when we break that down, we get 5 and 29. 29 doesn't break down its prime, which means that 145 does not simplify. So your distance formula answer is just the square root of 145. Now, for midpoint. Remember, midpoint is the average of two values because it's the middle of them, and that's the same thing as average. So when you find a midpoint, you are taking your x's and you're averaging. You're taking your y's and you're averaging them. So we have negative 4 plus 8 divided by 2 for the x value, and 3 plus 4 divided by 2 for the y value. And remember, your midpoint is a point, so you have to write it as an ordered pair. Negative 4 plus 8 is 4. 3 plus 4 is 7. And so we can either write this as 2 comma 7 halves, or we can write this as 2 and 3.5. Either one of those is fine for your answer. And that is for problem number 1. All right, so number 2 on the review says to know how to classify a conic based off of the general equation, which is your 9.6 notes. Remember, general equation means that it is equal to 0. Therefore, if it's not, you have to make sure that you move everything over to the same side. Now, when we are doing this, we are looking at the numbers that are in front of x squared and y squared. Those are the only two numbers that we care about. So when you look at those two numbers, we have a positive 1 and a negative 4. The rules tell us that when you have numbers that have opposite signs, that means that that represents the equation of a hyperbola. Looking at your next one, and by the way, these are off of your 9.6 notes. That's where I got these equations from. Looking at the next one, positive 3 and positive 3. If you look, they're the exact same number, same sign, same number, which means that that represents the equation of a circle. All right, now if you look at this next example, you'll notice that we have stuff that's over on the other side of the equal sign, so we have to move it over. So I'm going to rewrite this as 5y squared plus 10y minus 37 minus 8x plus 2x squared equals 0. Now again, look at the number in front of the x squared and in front of the y squared. So we have a positive 5 and we have a positive 2. They have the same sign, but they're different numbers. That gives you the equation of an ellipse. And then on this last example, again, move that over. 5y squared minus 9x minus 10y minus 14 equals 0. Now, if you'll notice, we are missing our x squared term. We only have a plus 5. We have no x squared. Whenever one of your squared terms is missing, that is the equation of a parabola. So you need to make sure that you know those rules in order to be able to classify your conics on the test. All right, looking at number 3, okay, these 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all dealing with parabolas. You are going to look at your general form equation and the equation that's given to you. You'll notice I wrote it down over to the right. If you look, 4p equals 12. That's what that is representing. The 12 in that equation represents what 4p equals. That tells us how to find p, which that means that p equals 3. Now, the other thing that this tells us is because the y is squared, that tells us that we have a horizontal parabola. And because p is positive, that tells me that it opens to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw my sketch and then find all of the information that it's asking for. So I have my vertex. Remember, that's the x comma y. X is paired with x, y is paired with y, so my vertex is at the point 1, 3. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to graph that. Now, I've already told you this is a horizontal parabola. It opens right. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that sketch to help to remind me which way to go to find all the other information that it's asking me to find. So I also need my vertex. I need the axis of symmetry. I need the focus. And I need my directrix. Now, the reason why we found P is used to find your focus and your directrix. Remember, the parabola will always open towards the focus, so that means since my parabola opens right, I go from the vertex 3 in order to find where my focus is. So that is the point 1, 2, 3, 4, comma 3. So that is how I find the focus. Find the directrix the same way, only go the other way. 3, 1, 2, 3. Now, directrix is a line. The line does not intersect or hit your parabola, which tells you that it's going to be up and down. Now, to find the equation of that line, look, which axis does it hit? It hits the x-axis at the value of -2. So the equation for your directrix is x equals -2. Okay, so that is your directrix. And the last thing we need to find is your axis of symmetry. For parabolas, the axis of symmetry goes through the vertex and the focus, so that's going to be this line right here. And that, of course, is the equation y equals 3. So that is how I find all pieces of information for number 3 for the first equation. Now let's go to the second equation. Okay, just like on the other one, 4p equals -16. So that gives me p equals -4. Also, because of the fact that my x is the squared variable, that tells me that this is a vertical parabola. Since p is negative, it's going to open down. So I'm going to find my vertex. My vertex is at the point -2, -4, and now I'm going to go ahead and draw that sketch. So -2, -4, there's my vertex. It opens down, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that. All right, now remember, you use P to find your focus and your directrix. Since it opens down, you go down from the vertex to find your focus. So there's my focus, and then I go up from the vertex to find my directrix. So now that is the point for focus. That is the point 2, -8. The directrix is the equation y equals 0. And then my axis of symmetry, of course, goes through the focus and through my vertex. And that is the equation x equals -2. Okay, number 4, working backwards. So this gives me information. It tells me I have a vertex at 3, 0 and a focus at 3, -1. So what you want to do when you're working backwards, draw a sketch of the information that was given. So I have my vertex right here at 3, 0, and I have a focus at 3, -1. Now remember, I said the parabola always opens towards the focus. What this tells me is it tells me that my parabola opens down, so therefore I have a vertical parabola. It opens down, which tells me that P is negative. And the distance from the vertex to the focus is what the value of P is, so P equals -1. So now go back, look at your formula. Which one is the vertical parabola? It's the one that has the x squared, so it's x minus h squared equals 4p times y minus k. Remember, this is h, this is k, and then plug in what you know. So we have x minus 3 squared equals -4 times y minus 0. Or you can just write that x minus 3 squared equals negative 4y. Either one of those is an acceptable answer. All right, go to number 5. Okay, so I have my vertex at negative 3, 4. And I have my directrix at x equals 1. So that tells me that my parabola opens away from the directrix, which means it opens left. So I have a horizontal parabola. It opens left, which tells me, again, p is a negative number. Count to find p. So remember, p is the distance from the vertex to the directrix. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So p equals negative 4. So I go get the equation for a horizontal parabola. So that's y minus k squared equals 4p times x minus h. Again, that's h, that's k. So then I get the equation y minus 4 squared equals negative 16 times x plus 3. And I'm done. All right, go to number 6. So here we are going to do completing the square to put the parabola in standard form. So for parabolas only, you look at the variable that's squared, which is going to be your x's. The x's stay on the left and everything else will move over to the right. So this is x squared plus 12x equals negative 4y minus 20. Now do completing the square. So remember, in order to do completing the square, you take your b value, you divide by 2, and square it to find out what goes in your parenthesis, in your blank. So you have 12 divided by 2, which is 6, squared is 36. Remember, if you add it to one side of the equal sign, you have to add it to the other so that they stay equal. Now what we're going to do is we're going to factor the left. You are forcing the left to be factored in a specific manner whenever you do completing the square. If you take your b and divide by 2, which is 6, and then keep the sign in front of it, so that's x plus 6, and then square that factor, it will always work that way. So you will always be able to factor when you do completing the square in that manner. And then you just need to simplify what's on the right. So we have negative 4y plus 16. Negative 20 plus 36 is 16. Now the last thing you need to do for parabolas is you need to factor out the number that is in front of the y. You have to have that in standard form, and that's how you do that. So the left stays the exact same. It doesn't change at all. And then we factor in negative 4 out. When we factor out a 4, we are left with y minus 4. Now my equation is in standard form, and you are done. So now let's go on and work on circles. Okay, so for circles, write the center and the radius of the circle. So your center for everything except for circles, what's with h and k is your vertex. I'm sorry, that's not right. For parabolas, it is vertex when you have h and k. For all of your other conics, h and k is your center. So the center for this is 3, negative 5. Your radius is, if you look at the equation, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, that tells me that r squared equals 24, so r equals the square root of 24. Then you have to simplify this. 4 and 6, 2 and 2, 3 and 2. I have a pair of 2's, so that means 1, 2 comes out, and I have a 3 and a 2 that stays in. So my radius is 2 square root of 6, because since both 3 and 2 stay inside the square root, you multiply them. So that is how I do number 7. All right, go on to number 8. Okay, so here we're given the center and we're given our diameter, and we're told to find the equation. Now, our equation uses radius, not diameter, and of course you know from geometry that the diameter is twice the radius, so that means that my radius equals 4. So now plug in to your equation your center and your radius. So this is x minus 2 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals the radius squared, so equals 16. All right, look at number 9. This tells you that you have an equation of a circle with center at the origin. Remember, center at the origin just means that your center is at the point 0, 0, and it passes through the point negative 5, 4. So just what that means is that you have a circle with center at the origin and goes through that point. Now, how does that help us? Any distance from your center to any point on the circle is your radius. So that means we are going to use distance formula to find the radius of my circle using the center, which is 0, 0, and the point negative 5, 4. So we have the distance equals negative 5 minus 0 squared plus 4 minus 0 squared. So we get negative 5 squared, which is going to be 25, and 4 squared, which is going to be 16. So we get the square root of 41. Square root of 41 does not simplify, but that's okay because remember, when you put it back into your equation, you square it, so you don't want to worry about simplifying the square root because you're just going to be undoing that again later. So now plug it into your formula. X minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals the square root of 41 squared. Simplify that, you get x squared plus y squared equals 41. And that is the equation of your circle. Now, number 10 gives you the endpoints of the diameter at the points 4, 7, and negative 6, 3. Now, when you have the endpoints of your diameter of a circle, you know that halfway is the center, so that means that the midpoint is used to find the center. And then once you have the center and a point on the circle, which are the endpoints of your diameter, you use the distance formula from the center to a point to find your radius. So let's go ahead and let's do the midpoint to find the center of my circle. So remember, midpoint is again just averaging two values. 4 plus negative 6 divided by 2 and 7 plus 3 divided by 2. Simplify that. And you get that the center is at negative 1, 5. Now, do distance formula to find your radius. Remember, you have to use the center and one of your other points. You don't use the endpoints of your diameter because that finds your diameter, not your radius. So you're going to go ahead and use the point negative 1, 5, and either one, 4, 7, or negative 6, 3, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to go ahead and use 4, 7. So I have negative 1 minus 4 squared plus 5 minus 7 squared. So I get negative 5 squared plus negative 2 squared, which is the square root of 25 plus 4, or the square root of 29. Now, once you have those pieces of information, plug it into your formula. X plus 1 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals the square root of 29, which is just 29, and there is the equation of your circle. All right, let's go to number 11. Number 11 is asking us to sketch the graph of x plus 3 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 16. In order to sketch your graph, you need your center and your radius. My center is the point negative 3, 2. My radius is 4. So draw your circle. You start off with the center, negative 3, 2. And then to draw your circle, you're going to use your radius. You go up 4, down 4, left 4, and right 4. And now just draw the circle that goes through those points. Remember, it's a sketch. It doesn't matter how pretty it is. And that is all you're asked to do on number 11. On number 12, we are asked to write the equation in standard form, so we're going to be doing completing the square. Now remember, for completing the square, we have to have our x's grouped together and our y's grouped together, first of all. And then we also have to go ahead and move any numbers over on the other side. In addition, we have to factor out the numbers in front of x squared and y squared in order to do completing the square. So I'm going to factor the 2 out of my x's, and I'm going to factor a 2 out of my y's. Okay, so what goes in blank with the x's? So b divided by 2, 4 divided by 2 squared is 4. Remember, there's a 2 on the outside of that parentheses, so you're not adding 4 to the left, you're actually adding 8. And then the same thing we're going to do for the y's. 6 divided by 2 squared, that gives me 9, and I'm actually adding 18 to the right side. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to factor the x's, so x minus 2 squared plus 2, y minus 3 squared equals, and then you have 8 plus 8 plus 18, which is going to give me 34. And then now, in order to get in standard form for the circle, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those 2's that are in front. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to multiply the entire equation by 1/2, or divide by 2. It's the same thing. And I get my equation of x minus 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 17. That is the equation of your circle. And you are done. All right, let's go on to ellipses. So here's number 13. The equation. It asks us to find the center, find A, B, and C, find your vertices, your covertices, your foci, your major axis length, and your minor axis length. So remember, center is paired inside the parentheses with x and y, so my center is a point, 2, -1. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that. So there's my center. All right, now find A, B, and C. So remember, for ellipses, A is always the bigger number. So that means that this is A squared there, and this is B squared there. So A is 4, and B is 2. In order to find C squared, remember, you're going to use your equation. C squared equals A squared minus B squared. And then you're going to simplify that because you get C squared equals 12. Simplify square root of 12, and you're going to get 2 square root of 3. So we're going to go ahead and graph our vertices using A. Now, A is under the x, so you're going to go in the x direction for A. So you go 4 to the left for one vertex, and you're going to go 4 to the right for the other vertex. And then what are those points? So that is the point -2, 1, and then the other point is, sorry, -2, -1, and the other point is 6, -1. All right, for covertices, B is paired up under the y, so that means I'm going to go up and down and go in the y direction for my covertices. So up 2 and down 2. And those points are the points 2, 1 and 2, -3. All right, so then now if you draw your sketch, remember it's just sort of like a oval, goes through those points. And then now we're going to go ahead and find my focus points. Now remember, your focus points go in the same direction as your vertices. So since I am going left and right for my vertices, I'm going to go left and right for my focus points. If you are having trouble figuring out how to graph a square root of 12, you just plug in square root of 12 in your calculator, and you're going to find that that is approximately the point, or the value 3.5. So that just means that your focus points need to be somewhere between 3 and 4 away from the center. So somewhere about right there and somewhere about right there. Now, to find out what those points are, we went left and right, which is changing my x value. So what that means is I'm going to take the center, and I am going to add and subtract C to the x value of the center. So 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 3, comma, and then the y value stays the same, -1. And that's how I find the points for my focus. Now, major axis and minor axis length. Major is your longer one, and remember that's from vertex to vertex. If A is from the center to a vertex, then that means from one vertex to the other is twice A. So the length of the major axis equals 8. And then same thing for minor axis. It's from covertex to covertex. That is 2b, so the minor axis length is 4. And that is everything that I've been asked to find. So let's go on to the other equation for number 13. Okay, so the center is at -1, 2. All right, A is, again, the larger value. So 16 is what A squared is. A is 4. B is 3. Find C by doing C squared equals A squared minus B squared. You're going to get C is square root of 7. Okay? Now, if you'll notice on this one, the A is paired up under the Y, which means for my vertices, I'm going to go up and down 4. All right, so those points are -1, 6, and -1, -2. For covertices, I'm going to go left and right 3. And those points are -4, 2, and 2, 2. All right, I'm going to go ahead and draw my sketch. Okay, focus points, remember, they're going to go in the same direction as your vertices. You're going to go up and down square root of 7. Again, if you're having trouble with how to graph a square root, then just go ahead, plug it in the calculator. Square root of 7 is around 2.6, so you're just going to be between 2 and 3. So that's about right there and about right there. I don't care where exactly it is as long as it's between 2 and 3, so it needs to be just close. And remember, on this one, I'm adding and subtracting to the Y value because I went up and down. So you use your center. The X value doesn't change. The Y value is adding and subtracting square root of 7, so it's 2 plus or minus square root of 7. And then to find my major axis length, that's 2A, so it's 8. My minor axis length is 2B, which is 6. All right, let's go on to number 14. All right, so we're going to go backwards, and so we're going to go ahead and graph what we've been given. So we're going to use the point -3, 4. That's one of my vertices. And then the point 0, -1 is one of my covertices. Now, if you'll remember, we have your major axis length and your minor axis length. Those two, you could be considered lines of symmetry. When you graph those, when you graph your lines of symmetry, you're going to notice that that is going to give you your center. So we have the center being at the value -3, -1. Now, in order to find the equation of ellipse, we need center, we need A and B. Well, A is the distance from the center to a vertex. So that means that I have A equals 5. And B is the distance from the center to a covertex. So then I have that B equals 3. You also need to know, is this a horizontal or a vertical ellipse? If you went up and down for your vertices, that makes it a vertical ellipse. So that just means that whenever you write your equation, what matters is where A goes. A squared will go under the Y, B squared will go under the X. And now just plug in what you have. So you have x plus 3 squared over 9 plus y plus 1 squared over 25 equals 1. And you're done. Okay, so number 15, we're told that the major axis length is 8. Well, if the major axis length is equal to 2a, then that means that A equals 4. So I've got part of my problem. I'm also told that I have foci at -1, 4 and 3, 4. That tells us two things. First of all, it tells us where the center is. So we have our center being at the point 1, 4. It also tells us that this is a horizontal ellipse because we know that the foci and the vertices go in the same direction. So since my foci are left and right, my vertices will also be left and right. Now, the distance from the center to a focus is C. So if I have A, I have C, and I need B, you're going to use your equation A squared minus B squared equals C squared. So you have 16 minus B squared equals 4. Negative B squared equals negative 12, so you have B squared equals 12. I'm not going to bother simplifying that because when I put it back into the equation, it's squaring B, so it would just be undoing it. So now I have A, B, and my center. It's a horizontal ellipse, so that means that the A value goes underneath the X, so it's X minus 1 squared over 16 plus Y minus 4 squared over B squared, which is 12, equals 1, and there's the equation of my ellipse. Okay, now completing the square for ellipses. So group your X's and Y's and move over to something that doesn't have a variable attached to it. So we have 4x squared minus 8x plus 25y squared minus 150y equals negative 129. Now again, completing the squared, you have to have a positive 1 in front of x squared and y squared. So from the x's, I'm going to factor out a 4. And from y, I'm going to factor out a 25. Okay. For the x's, what goes in the blank? So b divided by 2 and squared, you get 1. And then what I add to the right, 4 times 1 is 4. For the y's, I get 9. And then what I add to the right, is 25 times 9, which is going to be 225. And then now I'm going to go ahead and factor the x's and y's. So x minus 1, don't forget to keep the sign since it's a minus 2x, plus 25 y minus 3 squared equals, and then simplify the right and you get 100. And then in order to get the equation in standard form, we are going to divide by the number that's on the right, and then we will simplify our fractions. So we get x minus 1 squared over 25 plus y minus 3 squared over 4 equals 1. And that's the equation in standard form. Okay, let's go to hyperbolas. Okay, number 17. So here's the equation of my hyperbola. So the center is at 2, 5. So I've got the point 2, 5 right there for my center. Now, one of the main differences between hyperbolas and ellipses is that A is not necessarily the bigger number, but it is always the one that comes first. So A is 1 and B is 3. Now you also have a different equation to find C. You have C squared equals A squared plus B squared. So we have that C equals square root of 10. Okay? Now, in order to draw your hyperbola, the A or 1 is paired under the x's, so that's left 1 and right 1. Those are going to be your vertices. So your vertices are at the point 1, 5, and 3, 5. Okay? And then you're going to use B to help you find your rectangular box. So you go from the center up 3 and down 3. And then you're going to draw the box that contains those points. Remember, what the box does is it helps you find your asymptotes, and the asymptotes help you guide you on how to draw your equation. So you start at your vertices, which are here and here, and then you just kind of go along the asymptote to draw it. Okay? Now, for your focus points, just like with ellipses, it goes in the same direction as your vertices. So we're going to go square root of 10, which is about 3.2. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3.2, so a little bit over, and then 1, 2, 3, a little bit over 2. So those are my focus points. And I'm adding and subtracting to the x value of the center. So it's 2 plus or minus square root of 10, comma 5. Now, for the equation for my asymptotes, look at your equations for your formulas. And for this is a horizontal hyperbola because the x comes first. So it's going to be y equals plus or minus b over a times x minus h, and then plus k. So just plug in what we have to that equation. So we have y equals plus or minus b is 3, a is 1, so 3 over 1, which is just 3, parentheses, x minus 2, close parentheses, and then remember it's not minus 5, it's plus 5. Oops, sorry. I wrote k instead of 5, so plus 5. And those are the equations of your asymptotes, and you're done. Now let's go to the next equation. Okay, so my center is the point 1, negative 2. For my vertices, I am going to go I guess first we need to find A, B, and C. So A is 5, B is 4, and then remember I do C squared equals A squared plus B squared, so C squared equals square root of 41. For later when we need it, the square root of 41 is about 6.4. So I am going to go the A, or y comes first, which tells me it's vertical. So I'm going to go up and down 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now those points are 1, 3, and 1, negative 7. Okay, remember you're going to use B in order to find the box. So you're going to go left 4 and right 4. And now draw the box. And then now once you have your box drawn, you draw your asymptotes. And once you have your asymptotes drawn, you draw your hyperbola. All right, focus points. So since we went up and down for our vertices, we're going to go up and down for our focus points. So we're going to have up 6.2 and down 6.2, so it's about right there. And those points, so that changed the y value of my center, not the x. So it's negative 1, comma, negative 2 plus and minus the square root of 41. All right, the equations of my asymptotes. So when you look at your formula for a vertical ellipse, you'll notice that it's y equals plus or minus a over b, x minus h, plus k. So I have y equals plus and minus 5 over 4, x minus 1, minus 2. And I'm done. Okay, for number 18, we're given that the vertices are at the points 1, 7, and 1, negative 3, and that the focus points are at 1, 10, and 1, negative 6. So that tells me several things. First of all, it tells me that my hyperbola is a vertical hyperbola. It also tells me the center, which is going to be halfway. So that's going to be right here. So my center is at the point 1, 2. All right. I know that the distance from the center to a vertex is A, and the distance from the center to a focus point is C. So that tells me that A is 5. C is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I use C squared equals A squared plus B squared to find B. So I get that B squared equals 39. All right, so since this is a vertical hyperbola, that means that the y comes first. So I have y minus 2 squared over a squared, so 25, minus x minus 1 squared over b squared, which is 39, equals 1. And there's the equation of my hyperbola. Okay, so we have number 19. The major axis length is 4. Just like with ellipses, that means that 2a equals 4, so a equals 2. I'm going to go ahead and graph my focus points. So I have the point -2, -2. And I have the point 6, -2. So that tells me that this is horizontal, and it also helps me find my center. So my center is at the point 2, -2. I use from the center to the focus point is C. So C equals 4. And then I get 12 equals B squared. Again, we know that this is a horizontal hyperbola because foci went left and right, which means my vertices went left and right. So that just means that x comes first. And so now I write my formula. So I have the equation x minus 2 squared over a squared, so 4. And I have written a minus there, or a plus there, and it should have been a minus, so sorry about that. Okay. And then minus y plus 2 squared over b squared, which is 12, equals 1. All right, let's go to number 20. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and change the equation for number 20. So go ahead and take a minute to write down this new equation instead of the one that's written there. Okay, now that you've done that, remember we're going to group our x's and our y's. And we're going to move 41 over. Now, we have x squared plus 4x plus blank. We have to factor out that -2 from the y's, so minus 2 parentheses, y squared plus 2y plus blank equals 41 plus blank plus blank. So what goes in with your x's in completing the square is a 4, and then I'm going to add 4 to the right side. And for the y's, it's 1, but then I add -2 over to the other side. Sorry, make sure that you go ahead and change the equation. I changed that 41 to be a 40. All right, so we have x plus 2 squared minus 2 parentheses, y plus 1 squared equals, and then simplify the right side, which gives you 42. And now divide by 42 to put it in standard form, and you're done. So x plus 2 squared over 42 minus y plus 1 squared over 21 equals 1. And you are done.